Okay, you're going to check last night's homework and make sure that when we go through these, any that you missed, that you pause the video when you need to and correct it. Okay, for numbers 1 and 2, you weren't calculating the area. All you had to do was draw and label the height of both of these parallelograms. Hopefully, you look back at page 68 of your notebook that we did yesterday, and you should have found 2 pictures that would help you label these two. On the first parallelogram, you'll notice that the base is that bottom side, and the parallelogram is so skinny that you really cannot draw the height within the parallelogram, because if I go from this vertex to the opposite side, it would not form a right angle. So for this first one, you should have drawn the height of your parallelogram on the outside. So if this is the base, if that side is the base, this is the height. That's what you should have done for number 1. If you didn't do that, pause your video now and do that. Okay, number 2, if this is the base, then you could have drawn the height on the inside of the parallelogram, and make sure you draw that right angle, because that is how you identify the height. Base, and then this is the height, because it gives the distance from this side to the opposite side. Okay, for numbers 3, 4, 5, and 6, you had to calculate the area of each one of these. You should have followed the steps that we did in class yesterday, which means the first step is to always write the formula. So for all of these, you should have started out by writing A equals B times, that means to multiply, times H. I don't think I reminded everybody of this yesterday, but you could have used the calculator to do your calculations with. Okay, the correct answer for number 3 was 78 square centimeters. So if you did not get that, I want you to mark it wrong if you did not get it, and then you're going to correct it with me now. The first thing you should have done is written the formula A equals B times H. The second step is where we're going to replace the base with the number and the height with the number and then solve it. As you look at this parallelogram, 8 is not needed because that is just the side length. It is not the base because we don't see that dotted line touching it to form a right angle. Looking at our parallelogram, I'm going to replace B with 13 because this is the base. It's one of the side lengths. And I'm going to multiply that by the height, which is 6. The height is the distance from one side of the parallelogram to the other, and you must look for that right angle. And then when you multiply 13 times 6, you should have gotten 78 square centimeters. Now, if your answer does not look like mine and that it has 3 steps, I need you to pause the video and make that correction. Number 4, the first thing you should have done is written your formula, A equals B times H. If you look at your parallelogram, you had to identify the base and the height. Well, the base is this tiny side right here, and the way that I recognize that is because the height touches it to form this right angle. So I'm going to replace B with 1 2/10, and then my height is this side, which is 12 8/10. You should have used a calculator, and when you multiply 1 2/10 times 12 8/10, you should get 15 36 square feet. That is your answer for number 4. If you missed it, I need you to pause it and correct your work. Okay, let's look at number 5 and 6. Notice both of these have mixed numbers, and we reviewed this in class yesterday. This is going to take us a little bit longer to get through, but to begin with, you should have written the formula. And there are 3 measurements given: 2.5 inches, 5 1/4 inches, and 7 2/3 inches. The base is this side, and the way that I recognize that is because this height, when I extend it, touches it to form a right angle. So 2.5 is your base, and 5 1/4 is your height. If you didn't write that in, you need to pause your video now. So we're multiplying 2 1/2 and 5 1/4. Now, we talked about yesterday in class that before we can multiply with mixed numbers, we have to change them to improper fractions. So if you use what we did in class yesterday, 2 1/2 is actually 5 halves, because 2 times 2 is 4 plus 1 is 5. So I'm going to multiply that by 5 1/4. If I change it to an improper fraction, 4 times 5 is 20 plus 1 is 21. So I actually end up with 5 halves times 21/4. Okay, if you multiply 5 times 21, you get 105, and 2 times 4 is 8. Now, this is an improper fraction, so to simplify it, I need to change it back to a mixed number. If you remember from class yesterday, to do that, we're going to divide 8 into 105. Hopefully you've already done your division. 8 goes into 10 one time. 8 goes into 25 3 times. And I get 1 left over. So my final answer should be 13 1/8 square inches. Pause your video and make sure that this one is complete. Okay, for number 6, again, your first step would be to write the formula. The base is 4 1/3, and I'm going to multiply that. These parentheses is another way to show multiplication, and I'm going to multiply that times 3 1/2. However, just as in number 5, before I can multiply, I've got to change both of these to improper fractions. Well, when you change 4 1/3 to an improper fraction, you get 13/3. And when you change 3 1/2 to an improper fraction, you get 7 halves. Then when you multiply, 13 times 7 is 91. 3 times 2 is 6. And again, you're going to change that back to a mixed number because it is an improper fraction. When you divide 6 into 91, you get 15 with 1 left over. Number 6, the answer is 15 1/6 square. I'm having to write it below it because I'm running out of room. Square meters. Okay, number 7 and 8, you're really not solving anything. You just have to read and answer. So it says, Brittany and Sid were both asked to draw the height of the parallelogram. Their answers are shown below. So study their parallelograms. So Brittany drew her height from this base to the opposite side, and Sid drew his height from this side to the opposite side. And the answers, or the question says, are both Brittany and Sid correct? If not, who is correct? Explain your answer. Both are correct. Both are correct. From the Ed puzzle yesterday, you should have recognized that the height doesn't have to go always the same direction, but you should notice this right angle. So both are correct because both heights, look at both of the heights, both heights form a right angle to the base. Now your answer doesn't have to be exactly like mine, but hopefully it mentioned the right angle that the height forms. And if you didn't explain your answer, make sure you go back and do that now. Finally, number 8, do the rectangle and the parallelogram below have the same area? Explain why or why not. If you remember the activity that we did at the table yesterday, we took a parallelogram and we cut off the end of it and we transposed it to the opposite direction or the opposite end to make a rectangle. So once I did this, if you look, the length would be 15, the width would be 8. If we transform that, if we cut that end off and move it to the next. So, do the rectangle and parallelogram have the same area? Yes, and it said to explain. I just explained that. If you cut off one end of the parallelogram, this triangle on the left, and move it to the opposite end, it forms a rectangle. So yes, if you cut the triangle on the left off and move it to the opposite end, it forms a rectangle. And both rectangles have a length of 15 and a width of 5. Okay, so make sure that all of your answers for 1 through 8 are correct. And once you're finished with this, I want you to keep out your homework because we're going to look at number 9, problem number 9 together.